Perfect. Okay, so we're back for and ready to do our regular meeting for Halifax Water Board. And welcome anyone who is able to listen to us today. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll get started right away, as we're a little bit later than we thought. So we'll go right into ratification of in-camera motions. We could have someone move 1A.
Madam Chair, if you'd like.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Daigle-Gammon. And we have a seconder, did I hear?
Commissioner Lovelace, thank you.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, any questions? Not seeing any. Can all in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Thank you. Next is the approval order of business of additions or deletions. Do we have any today? Any additions or deletions? Commissioner Farquhar?
I would like to bring forward information report 1A for discussion at the end of the meeting. I just have a few questions on some of the findings. I said 1A, I meant 1I.
Did I hear a seconder on that? 1A or 1A or 1I?
1I. I'll second that.
Okay, terrific. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The motion's carried. Thank you. So to approval of minutes of regular meeting held on Tuesday, September 23rd, 2021, Thursday, October 28th, 2021. We have a motion for that one.
Commissioner Rawlings can make that motion that the Halifax Water Board approve the minutes of the September 23rd, 2021 and October 28th, 2021 regular meetings.
Seconded, Lovelace.
Commissioner Lovelace seconds that. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Number 3, business arising from the minutes. I'm just going to switch my page here. Sorry, my computer gremlins are still at me here.
If it helps you, I don't believe we have any business arising from the minutes.
Thank you. All I saw was a letter and then nothing. And okay, so great. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. Seeing none for there, we'll move on to 4.1 and under financial. We have operating results for the 7 months ended October 31st. And we have, do we have someone? Here. Louis, thank you.
Yeah. We're providing quite an extensive report on our operating results. And what I wanted to do is sort of run through and highlight some of the key issues from the report. The first part, we provide information on our balance sheet. The first item I wanted to flag was we continue to have a healthy cash position. We have approximately $82 million in the bank as of the end of the month. Did want to highlight that approximately $62 million of that relates to RDC and is encumbered as we need to use it for the requirements of that program. We do have approximately $20 million. We described it as unencumbered, which is a very healthy cash position at this point. The second item on the balance sheet I wanted to flag was the accounts receivable. So there's a little bit of additional information that's there that shows that our receivable balance year over year has decreased by about 2.5%, which is positive news in light of and what we expected as the organization and the municipality comes out of the pandemic. We also started to provide a bit of additional information on the age of our accounts receivable and the number of customers that have balances that are and the age of those balances. So we're starting to look at that. Our information is fairly new, and we will be refining how we report that. But right now, what we've seen is the number of customers that have balances that are older continues to decrease. Again, a very positive sign as we move forward. The next area I wanted to flag was the capital work in progress. So these are capital projects that are in the works that have not closed, so the assets aren't in use as of yet. The balance of that account is approximately $55 million, which is about 47 million as compared to 47 million last year, so about a $7 million increase, which again is a positive sign as we get our capital program more advanced. The next item I wanted to flag was in our accounts payable and our long-term debt, both of which continue to be consistent with last year, so nothing significant there in terms of what we're looking at. We have attached at
Oh, we lost you, Louis. Lost the voice.
Your audio's gone.
There we. Can you try that again, Louis? No.
Can I start at the beginning? Was it that exciting? Or?
No, it's just, you don't need to start all over again. Just where you, that last bullet, I think.
Okay, so what I was saying is that our payables and our debt are consistent with where we were last year, which is a good sign. We have started to provide additional information on our spend and the vendors that we are paying. So that's more for your information, but gives you that extra piece of insight into the organization. Then I wanted to move into the operating side. So again, we provide a lot of detail, but I wanted to sort of highlight a couple of key pieces. One is we budgeted last year an operating deficit of $11.6 million. Wanted to say as of the end of October, our forecast is coming in about almost $4 million better than that. So our deficit is forecasted to be down to about $7.7 million. So again, a good sign. We anticipate that will go down further as we get close to the end of the year, mostly looking at our depreciation and as we'll talk about later in terms of our capital spend, the amount of spend we have in the current year reduces the amount of depreciation that we're spending. So we anticipate that deficit will continue to come down. On the revenue side, I wanted to flag, we provide information in the report about consumption. So consumption by our various customer groups. What I wanted to say is that our consumption continues to be we see growth in our consumption year over year, very marginal, which is we normally expect. But we are starting to see the customer class, the consumption by customer class, return more to normal. So we're seeing the residential consumption come down versus last year. We're seeing the commercial, the industrial, and institutional sectors start to increase their consumption. So again, from a consumption perspective, getting more, I'll use the term normal. On the expenditure side, we have information around our operating expenditures. The key point there for me was that we're forecasting to be about $651,000 less than we had budgeted, which is a good thing to see. And then I'm close to the end of the report. We provide information by service, so by stormwater, wastewater, and water. And what we provide information on is you can see that our forecasted reduction in our deficit is across the board. So it isn't just one area, but we're seeing reductions in our expenses across the board. And that was my.
Great. Thank you very much, Louis. Are there any questions for Louis at this point? Commissioner Rawlings?
I put a note on page 11, but it's probably a general question. Louis, any concerns with sort of CPI and construction materials on the year-end forecasts? Or, I know you've probably considered it, but any general comment about that?
I think we'll see most of the costs that are impacted CPI wise. We're starting to see that in the forecast where we're managing it within what's there. We will see on the construction side that will show up in the capital spend this year and going into next year. We do anticipate that it may have an impact on our salary costs depending on what CPI ends up being for the year and whether or not it translates into an impact on our salary rates for next year. But to date, we're to the extent that the information is known, we're forecasting that in the numbers you're seeing.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just to follow up on that, the salary increases and CPI, how are they linked? Is this like a by contract
You want me to
or something else?
If you can, Kathy.
So we've got about 517 employees. 2/3 of those are unionized. The wage increases for QP 227 and 1431 are in accordance with collective agreements that have already been signed and are 5-year collective agreements. So we've got certainty around what those expenses will be. The issue is the non-union salaries, so that's about the other third of the organization. This is the year that we are doing a market survey. In our off years, we adjust non-union salaries by CPI. But so CPI is normally a factor in how we set our salaries. CPI will come into play in terms of the market analysis, because when we do the market analysis, we've got an external consultant engaged, Korn Ferry, who goes and looks at the broader public sector nationally and benchmarks our positions against other positions. And we have a policy that sets our salaries around P50 national. So we don't want to be the lowest salaries. We don't want to be the highest salaries. We try to keep ourselves dead in the middle. And because coming out of COVID-19, we're beginning to see more inflation, that is going to have upward pressure, I think, on salaries also. So I'm anticipating what we might see come out of that market survey might be a little bit higher than what we've seen in other years, but will probably still be in line with CPI because CPI is trending higher right now also.
Okay. Is it CPI for Halifax or CPI for Nova Scotia or something else?
So when we do the CPI adjustments to salaries, it's based on CPI for Halifax. But when we do the market true up of our salaries, we're looking at the market competitiveness of our salaries right across Canada, because of course there's not a lot of other big water, wastewater utilities in Atlantic Canada that we can benchmark against.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Commissioner Dago-Gammon?
I feel like I've got half of a question, and I'm not smart enough to have the other half of it. Wait, but so the question is really around the depreciation and amortization that we applied. So it's increased by about the 1.2 million. And there's just a comment. I know it was about utility plant service, but the word intangibles always is a mystery to me. So what would intangibles sort of encompass?
Intangibles could be money we have spent on computer software.
Okay.
Right. It could be that's a
component for Halifax Water.
Yeah. So it's
your capital.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be stuff that we would be able to say we'll move this vehicle from here to here. It's stuff that so it's those types of costs that we would consider intangible.
Okay. Do we have is there a depreciation strategy or policy? Like you know, this category of things is straight line depreciation. This category is, you know, 20% per year over the lifespan. Like, do we have that kind of a policy?
Some of that is driven by the UARB directly. They make specific reference to what our depreciation rate should be. We do have a whole separate set of rules around the IFRS, which is what we use for our audited statements, and we'd have a policy and approach around that as well. So we have two sets of calculations that we do.
So the UARB sets the guideline for some of it,
Right.
and then the commission gets to set their own according to accounting principles kind of thing.
Right, for useful life, etc. And there are subtle differences between the two that affects how we report under IFRS versus the UARB.
And so I guess that would lead into when a piece of equipment is deemed to be like unserviceable or surplus as well.
I saw Kathy put her finger up, so I may have lied, but I don't think I did.
You did not lie. I just wanted to complete your answer by letting Kathy Deagle-Gammon know that if we want to deviate from the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board accounting and reporting handbook for water utilities, we actually have to apply to get permission to deviate from it when it comes to depreciation. So the depreciation that gets built into our budgets and gets built into rates is all thoroughly scrutinized by the URB, is approved by the URB before it gets added into our revenue requirements. And we have to follow that handbook. If we want to deviate from it, we have to apply for permission and get approval to deviate from it. And the IFRS financial statements, the depreciation in that is a little bit different in terms of the calculation. It's the biggest reconciling item, or one of the biggest reconciling items between when we do IFRS statements and URB statements. But we have to do the IFRS reconciliation and statements so we can be consolidated with the municipality's financial statements. But those depreciation calculations don't impact our customers and don't impact our rates.
Right. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Rawlings has a follow-up.
Sorry, I didn't realize my question was still on this report. There were so many pages, Louis. In attachment 2, thank you for the detail on the vendors and the costs. There's a one-time vendor for a significant amount over 500,000. Is there any more detail on that?
So what one-time vendors would be vendors that we would literally use very, very occasionally, so literally once. So rather than set them up as a vendor and go through the process, what we do is we have a way to enter in their name, their address as all in one account for tracking purposes. So it's just a way of reducing the vendor list from, let's say, 1,000 to 10,000, right? Like it really is. If we refunded $23 to a customer, it would show up in the one-time vendor as opposed to us going through the process of creating a whole process for a vendor.
Okay, so it's accumulation. It's not one vendor being paid $500,000.
It would be okay. Literally thousands.
Okay, thank you for that.
No problem.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions, so thank you very much, Louis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 4.2, proposed 2022 Halifax Regional Water Commission Employees Pension Plan Budget.
So I've asked Heather Britton to do that presentation for us. So Heather, over to you.
Excellent. Good morning. So what I have for you today is the proposed Halifax Water Employees Pension Plan Budget for 2022. Included in the board package, item 4.2, you will see the attachment there for the statement of changes in net assets available for benefits. This is a core reporting tool for pension plans, and it details the revenues, contributions, and expenses that are coming in and out of the plan during the year. In the document we've provided, You can see on the far right-hand side, the 2022 proposed budget. And then you can see next to it for comparative purposes is the approved budget for 2021, and then the audited financial results of that statement for 2020. So for 2022, we are projecting budgeted revenue of 15.2 million, contributions of 7 million, and expenses of 6 million, for projected changes in net assets available for benefits of 16.2 million. Revenue of 15.2 million is made up of two key components: investment income and the increases or decreases in the fair value of investment assets. The key assumptions that we used in determining these amounts for 2022, for investment income, we based it on the 4-year average. Investment income tends to be fairly consistent over the last number of years. We based that on the average. The increases or decreases in the fair value of the investment assets, much more difficult to predict, and certainly the bigger components of the revenue. So we based that on the September 2021 results. We extrapolated that to the end of the year, and we added in a 5% growth factor for 2022. Jake? And just as a side note to that, I didn't add that onto the presentation, but investment income is also offset by investment management fees. And for 2022, I believe that's budgeted at about $200,000. So the next section is the contributions. Contributions are budgeted at $7 million. That is made up of employer contributions, employee contributions, and additional voluntary contributions. Jake? The key assumptions that we used in this section was we estimated 20 new hires for 2022. The corporate budget has not yet been approved by the Halifax Water Board, so we don't actually know that number for sure. But we did use 20 new hires in the 2021 budget, so we used that same number again. It's a reasonable number. Salary and wage escalation, I know we spoke to that a few minutes ago. Because this is a year that we're going out to the market survey, we're not sure what the non-union escalation is going to be, so we based that on a fairly conservative estimate of 2%. For the union groups, we based it on the respective collective agreements. Pensionable earnings are capped at $140,945. That cap has been in place since 2015 and will remain in place until 2023. At which time it'll increase 1% thereafter. And we assume no changes to the current contribution rate of 10.34%. There is an actuarial valuation scheduled for the new year in 2022, and that could result in a change to that rate, but we don't know that yet. So we base that on the current rate, 10.34%, and assume there's no changes. So moving on to the expense section, we have budgeted, we're projecting to budget $6 million in expenses. This is made up of 4 components. So benefit payments to our pensioners, termination payments, pre-retirement death benefits, and administrative expenses. So the key assumptions that were used, for the indexing of our pensions, we use 2% and 1% accordingly. Our pensioners, or our pensions, are indexed for pension benefits that were earned pre-2016. They are indexed at CPI to a maximum of 2%. And pension benefits that were earned post-2015 are indexed at CPI to a maximum of 1%. And because CPI was tracking at the end of October at over 3%, we are assuming and budgeting maximum indexing to our pensions for 2022. We're estimating 9 new retirements. That's based on a 6-year average and retirement eligibility. Termination payments, another difficult one to predict. It is difficult to know who will leave Halifax Water and how much service they'll have, when they're leaving, but we base that on a 5-year average. And we are assuming no pre-retirement death benefits for 2022. I didn't note this on the slide, but administrative expenses make up a little less than 5% of the overall expense budget for 2022. And it consists of things like actuarial fees, audit fees, custodian fees, those kinds of things. Right, so that's listed there if you wanted to take a look at that. So after all of the revenue and contributions and expenses, we are proposing an increase, proposing a budget of an increase in net assets available for benefits of 16.2 million for 2022. For comparative purposes, the 9 months ending September 30th, 2021, there was an increase in net assets available for benefits of 11.6 million. Any questions?
Thanks. Commissioner Rawling?
Just 2 questions, Heather. Any comment on this, the fair value of investment? I know the pension plan's in good shape. Can't the fair value go either way, and at some point then the numbers drop? Do we put
It
any
certainly can.
protection in there, or we just calculate year to year?
I mean, it can, and if you look at back in 2020, the first quarter, although I don't have it right here, the first quarter of 2020, there was a huge drop, of course, and that number was actually a negative. In the second quarter of 2020, it completely recovered, and I can't remember the exact percentages at the time, but yeah, so we do see some of that. And this year, compared to the budget, it is over budget. It's over the prorated budget. We were trying to be a little bit conservative last year with the 2021 budget, and we're running significantly over budget really on that line item. It's an estimate.
And second question, on the it's on page 93. It's in the attachment under training. We're showing $1,000. I know we had talked at some point about training for the trustees. I don't know if it falls under that line item or under general operating for Halifax Water, but I didn't know if there's any consideration to pursue training for the trustees.
You know, that's been discussed, and I know that we've looked at a couple of different options. I think we did circulate some information about the one of the courses offered through, it might be CPBI, I can't think of it right now, or the IF, the International Foundation of Employee Benefit Plans, Foundations of Trust Management Standards. I think we did circulate some information on that. I don't know where that's going, and I'm not sure if it would be shared maybe between the operational budget and the pension plan budget.
Yeah. If I could add to that, there is actually a budget for board training. So if board members participate in training related to their role as pension trustees, it would typically get split between the operating budget, and the board related expenses are in the general manager's budget and the pension plan.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Commissioner Dago-Gammon.
Thank you. Just a curiosity question. The pensionable earnings cap, is that the same as the YMPE, the year's maximal pensionable earnings?
It was in 2015. And Kathy, I'll let you take it from there if you don't mind.
Sure. So when we did the pension plan redesign in 2015, one of the things that was done as basically a compromise and a bunch of changes that we made to help bring the pension plan back into a more positive financial position was to freeze the maximum earnings base, and it was frozen for 8 years at the 2015 level. So the freeze will end around 2023.
So what is the YMPE now? Heather, do you know that?
Off the top of my head, I do not. I think it's 155-ish, maybe.
Yeah, it's 155 or 156 right now.
So the 8 years ends in 2023, and then will the actuaries then look at a blend to see what was a perceived difference for employees on the pension to figure out then what should the earnings cap be?
So what will happen is after 8 years, the maximum earnings cap will start to index at 1% per year. But the other piece that was put in place as part of making the defined benefit pension plan healthier and mitigating risk on the long run was to put in place a pension framework that moved employees' earnings once you get above that maximum earnings cap out of a defined benefit plan into a DC plan.
Right.
So there's a DC plan that kicks in for the portion of earnings that are above the maximum earnings base.
Do we know how many employees are in defined benefits and how many are in defined contribution? Because I think I remember that all new employees are going into defined contribution, right?
No, that's not correct, actually. The way the framework works is all new employees become members of the defined benefit pension plan.
Okay.
So we still have a defined benefit pension plan for all Halifax Water employees. What happens though is once an employee has earnings that are creeping up above that cap, that portion of their earnings goes into the DC plan. Right now, there wouldn't be very many employees who are in that kind of supplemental pension plan framework. Heather or Louis might know off the top of their heads, but I'm guessing maybe it's 6 or 7.
Okay. It's a luxury to see a defined benefit plan these days.
Louis, did you have something to offer there? I don't think we heard you.
No, I was just agreeing with Kathy that it's in that 6 to 8 range.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. That was a great presentation, by the way. I love pension presentations.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, Louis, yours was too.
Yes.
All right, seeing no further indications of questions, we appreciate it. We're going to need a motion that we approve the proposed 2022 budget for plan for covering the period of January 1st to 2022, December 31st, 2022. You have anyone to move that?
I can do that. Would you like me to read out the motion?
Sure.
I move that the board approve the proposed 2022 budget for the plan covering the period January 1, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. Is that the one?
Yes.
Yep.
Seconder?
Seconds, Lovelace.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Can I just add one quick point?
Sure.
In the board, in your package, there is an information report on the defined contribution plan. I believe it's 4I. So, and for if you're interested in those other plans, the information is there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
That's okay. Okay, so all in favor of the motion on the table?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Thank you all very much. So we'll move on to 4.3, Halifax Regional Water Commission Employees Pension Plan Proposed Actuarial Valuation Assumptions, January 1st, 2022.
So I'll apologize up front. My pension expert, Alan, is not available today, so I'm going to do my best. And Kathy will help me out if I go astray. So, sorry, Jake, the next slide. So what we're looking at is this is the fiscal year that we're required to do an actuarial valuation. The valuation is done by Eckler, who is our actuaries for the pension plan. Really is a process of looking at what our pension plan has done, what the actual results have been since our last actuarial valuation, and then using a series of assumptions that we're bringing here before you today as a starting point to determine what our liabilities, what our growth will be in the future, and then to determine whether or not that will affect our contribution rates. So that's the process that we're about to go to begin. So I'll walk through a couple of slides and provide a little bit of information around what those assumptions are. So Jake, the next slide. So we are required by legislation to have an actuarial evaluation every 3 years. There is a condition that if our solvency ratio is below 85%, we would have to go every year, but right now it's well above that. So we're still in a 3-year cycle, which is good. The process will be to look at our assets, compare that to the liabilities, the obligations for future pensions. It will be looking at our current contributions, both the employer side and the employee side, and looking to see if there'd be any additional special payments that would be required. So the next slide, Jake. So this slide just sort of captures where we were back when the last valuation was done. You can see the market value of our assets was 126 million. Our liabilities were 124. So we had a surplus back in the beginning of 2019. What you see in the next couple of columns is at the end of each year for our audit of the pension plan purposes, we do an extrapolation. So that is essentially the actuaries going in, doing a much higher level look at where things stand and providing us with sort of a reasonable estimate of where things are going into the future. So for the last couple of years, we've seen our surplus grow, we've seen our funded ratio continue to improve. And now that leads us up to where we are now in terms of our current year. Next slide, Jake. So in terms of the last valuation, we estimated the contributions, what were required were about, in terms of the amount that we would need to recover through our contributions was about the $5.8 million number we had. That's shared equally between the employees and the employers. So we have pension contribution rates of 10.34%. As we go forward into the next year, based on the assumptions and what the results that they see, those may need to be affected. The next slide, please. So the assumptions that the actuary is looking at are primarily in these 3 categories. So the economic ones, the demographic related ones, and then just some general other assumptions that are affected. So next slide. So on the economic side, one of the key drivers for our contribution rates and our liabilities going forward is the discount rate. Eckler is saying that information will be available later in December, so we don't have an update now for the committee, for the board, sorry. But an indication that a 0.1% change in our discount rate would affect our liabilities by about 1.6%. So very small changes in the discount rate have a fairly significant rate impact on our liabilities. Inflation relevant, as Heather referenced, as we index our benefits, but we do have a cap on the indexing of our benefits that are paid. It's 2% up to a point. I believe it's 2016, and then it's 1% after that. So salary increases, we talked about. The actuaries have said their current assumption is based at about 3.9%. So, but they will be refining that as they come forward with a more detailed list of assumptions. The YMPE, Kathy added additional information there. And then the interest credit on employee contributions, currently they used about 4% last valuation. This time they're proposing to decrease it to 2.5%. I'll try and get the word out this time. The demographic perspective, one of the key issues is looking at the mortality rates and the tables that they use to determine the mortality. This was an issue that was, I would say, heavily debated through the last redesign of the pension plan, they have proposed a change in the table that they use this time from to a more private sector focused table as opposed to a public sector focused table. That is, there will be some additional information, additional work done on that to finalize that proposal. But then in terms of the retirements, the number of retirements that they anticipate, terminations, et cetera, they will be primarily looking at our current experiences and determining whether or not that sort of translates into the future. The next one, please. So there are assumptions around marital status. Right now, it's the married percentage is 100%. They're proposing to move that to 85%. Age difference, they still have males that are 3 years older than their spouses. So they use that in terms of the calculations that go forward. So the going concern annual expenses is just essentially where we think the administrative costs, et cetera, will go going into the future. Solvency wind-up expenses, I believe, becomes part of the solvency calculation that I referenced at the beginning that needs to be over 85%. We do have an exemption for that calculation from that requirement, but we still go through the process of calculating the percentage of wind-up. So that leads us to sort of the input of all these assumptions. It comes back with information. It comes back with, here's how the plan has been doing. It predicts where the plan will be in the future based on the assumptions. It will always look to the long term, as we're required to do whenever we deal with the pension plan. And we also will be looking in terms of the new requirements related to the discount rate and the need to have a specifically referenced provision for adverse deviation. So there will be a subtle change in how the discount rate is reflected. So that will be coming forward when the actuaries bring forward their discount rates. And then we just have any questions.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Sorry, I didn't see. Commissioner Farquhar?
Thanks for the presentation. This is my first time going through this process. I started after the valuation was done in 2019. So this is a really interesting exercise for me to go and try to evaluate all of these assumptions. I had a question about whether or not HRM, which we share the pension plan, to kind of fund it together, are they going through an actuarial valuation at the same time as us?
So we share, HRM manages our assets.
Yeah.
We manage the liability side, the payment to pensioners side is all managed with Halifax Water. HRM's solvency ratio, and it's been a while since I looked at it, was below the 85% mark. They were required to have valuations every year. So they would go through this process. We're doing it every 3 years. They would have been going through it every single year. They have this list of assumptions, their discount rate is calculated, and they have the debate about changes in discount rates and whether or not it affects the contribution rates. So they're in a much tighter constraints related to the performance of their plan than Halifax Water's plan.
Thank you. With regard to the economic assumptions, have we compared our economic assumptions against what Halifax Regional Municipality has for their economic assumptions? And are there any differences?
Kathy, I don't know if you wanted to add a point on the first part.
Yeah, I wanted to add 2 points. One is that the assumptions used for actuarial valuations need to be specific to the type of plan. there are some distinct differences between the Halifax Water Employees Pension Plan and the HRM Pension Plan, not least of which is the type. So we are an employer-sponsored plan, whereas the municipalities plan is a joint trustee plan. And the risk is different in both plans. So that leads to some differences in how economic evaluations are set. So for example, Halifax Water bears the risk as an employer-sponsored plan for going concern deficits, whereas in a joint trustee plan, like the municipalities, those types of deficits get split 50-50 between the employer and the employees. But one thing that is now consistent between the two plans is that we are using the same actuary. So Eckler's does the actuarial evaluation for both the Halifax Water Plan now and the municipalities plan. And although we are not a voting member on the HRM Pension Committee, we are members of the Pension Committee. Louis and/or Alan attends those meetings, and we are able to review and evaluate the differences between what economic assumptions are used and understand the differences between them. So although we're planning for our actuarial evaluation now, and we know what we're looking at for next year, we have not yet seen what's coming for HRM to enable us to kind of do that comparison and ask those questions to the actuaries. But we're expecting there will be differences because there are different types of plans.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know that. Then Louis, can you just go with regard to the discount rate? Can you just go into a little bit more detail explaining the provision for adverse deviation versus last time around, the assumptions contain some conservatism, and I just need a little bit help better grasping what's happened here.
I might need a little bit of help as well, so work through this. So in the past, what the actuaries would have come back and said, you know, your assets are earning X rate. Yeah, that might be on the high side, or that there may be a little bit of risk in that, so they'd reduce it by a sort of a conservative sort of factor to get back to the discount rate that then they use to do their calculations. Under the new rules, they will start at what they think the assets will actually earn. They would then need to have a specific number to say our provision for adverse deviation is X, let's say 7%. They start with their current discount rate. They subtract the provision for adverse deviation to come up to the discount rate that's then used to go forward in the process. We anticipate the two will be the same because we had a fairly healthy conservative factor built into it. It just needs to be very explicit this go round.
I get it. At least I think I do. No other questions for now. Anybody else?
Kathy, did you want to add anything there? No, okay. No further questions? Okay, we're going to need a motion to approve this. Any takers? Would you like me to read it? It would be that the board approve the attached proposed actuarial valuation assumptions in principle to be used in conducting the January 1st, 2022 actuarial evaluation of Halifax Regional Water Commission Employee Pension Plan, also known as the plan.
Are you putting that on the floor, Becky?
No, I'm reading it because I wasn't seeing anyone else, so I thought we'd get ahead on that, at least saying the words.
I didn't want to interrupt you. Certainly, I'll put that on the floor. That the board approves the attached.
We have a seconder, Commissioner Cuttle. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Oh, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Thank you all. We'll now move on to number 5 under capital approvals. We have capital expenditures for the 7 months ended October 31st, 2021. And that you again, Louis?
Yes, it is. and this is, well, we provide a fair amount of detail in the report in terms of our assets and where we are in terms of our spend for the to the end of the year, or sorry, as of the end of October. The total budget we have available is about $271 million. We've spent on the projects approximately $57 million. We continue to have about $214 million available. And as we get to the end of the year, we'll see the sort of the invoices related to the sort of the construction season coming in. So we expect those numbers to increase. We go through a fairly formal closeout process that will then transfer the assets that are in use onto our balance sheet on our financial statements. But as of now, we have spent approximately 21% of the total available budget.
Thank you. Reid, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think when I began reporting to you on this in June, I alerted you to the fact that at that point, out of our capital budget of this year of about $125 million, we'd identified about $48 million in projects that were not going to proceed this year for issues such as land access, in one case, and there was about perhaps half a dozen projects that were of significant size. In one case, it was the Cowie Reservoir project that we deliberately delayed. That business of building reservoirs sort of has its own timing and cycle, and we wanted to hit the timing right to get as good of a price as we can. So that number of 48 million has grown, not surprisingly, by a small amount. I'd say another 3 or 4 million of known projects that are not going to proceed. But I can give you an update on 3 of the largest ones. So our Cowie Reservoir project is actually, you approved the increase in funding at the last meeting. We've got the final URB approval on it just yesterday, and we're actually in the process of signing up the contractor to get an early start. We won't see any work on site until the spring, but the contractor has a lot of preparatory work, and that's going to start very soon. Our Albro Lake project, we still have a small number of land issues to deal with, but that's getting very, very small. We're still working towards a spring start for that $8 million project. And the largest of those is our Fairview Cove sewer tunnel project, that $18 million. We're dealing with some significant land issue there, but a couple of months ago, we've started a good sort of with the main landowner executive level meetings, one-to-one on a good. We're meeting every 3 or 4 weeks, and we've got a very short number of land issues. So we're still hoping to resolve those issues in the next month or two. After that, we have a little bit of detailed design and some final approvals with the URB, but hopefully we can get that started in springtime. If you want to add anything to that, Kathy.
Great. Any questions from the commission? No? Oh, Ted?
Okay, thanks for the update. Just regarding to the capital spend, this comes up most meetings now about this. It's hard to get through our capital projects. I know there's a couple of reasons for that, including COVID. And in particular, I wanted to ask how much of the bottleneck is due to not having the available labor, both in the office for managing these projects versus maybe contractors to do construction.
I could say, in terms of our ability to execute the projects, I think, as I've mentioned before, we are under-resourced, and to get to our capital spend of 130 or so million that our IRP would like us to do is going to take more resources. And we have a board workshop next month, and I'll be talking a little bit about some of our plans for not just resources, but how we, as we grow, execute the process more effectively. I think one thing in that we need to do as well is, as our projects grow and become more complex, sometimes there's a level of complexity that arises in the planning. And also because of the increased spend, the URB is asking more questions, and appropriately we need to have the answers to those questions. So I think what we would like to see in the coming months is, we're still going to get the same amount of work done, but you're going to see a longer planning cycle so that we're actually delivering the work more on the timeline that our 5-year capital budget's suggesting. On the contractor side, that is an issue, and Kathy and I have talked about we're going to start discussions with the contracting and consulting engineering community about their ability to deliver, because HRM is looking to increase their capital spend. We're looking to increase ours. We did have this summer a small number of projects where contractors bid the work. Either prices were high because we didn't get people to bid, or contractors bid projects in a combination of supply chain issues and just contractors being too busy to do it sort of effectively in a way that we like. So there's one project in particular that's about $1.5 million that we had hoped to start this year. The contractor's on board and signed up. They're going to do next year, which is really just a contractor capacity issue. But in terms of actual contractor capacity at our current level, I would say that's a minor factor.
Mm-hmm. As a follow-up, do we need to hire people now?
I would say yes, and we are doing some hiring. We're ramping up slowly, but I think we want to get a better target of what the the engineering processes are going to look like in a year before we go too far in that.
Okay. And will you be coming? Are you waiting for board approval for any of these hires?
Indirectly through our capital and operating budgets.
Okay. All right, well, I'll mention it there that I would be, if you feel that you need to hire people, I would be fully in support of getting ahead to hire these people, because I know that we're going to be in competition with everybody else in Halifax who's trying to build everything over the next couple of years. And
Absolutely.
I've seen it in my time when I was in Alberta during the boom years, that there just wasn't enough people to go around. So I'm completely in favor of whatever we can do to help you get the personnel you need to get ahead on, to start managing the wave of these capital projects that are just coming in relentless.
Yeah,
we can
so
talk
I
more
believe
about that at the workshop.
Yeah, I believe it's December 9th, and I plan to show you some of our plans for both staffing and business process as we go forward.
Okay, look forward to it. Thanks, Reed.
Thank you, Commissioner Rawlings.
Reed, can you just comment on the detail in the attachment? The 2 line items that jumped out at me were the water equipment and the water corporate projects. And I don't know if equipment is tied to fleet or not, but could you just comment on those 2 line items?
I'm struggling to find those right now. I've got the report up here. Water equipment.
Jake might be able to put it up. It's page 102.
So
go ahead, Louis.
I think part of the challenge is these are sort of amalgamation of many individual capital work orders. It might be hard to talk in general, but I'll see if we need to provide additional information on any specific one, we can certainly dig it in. So,
and Commissioner Rawlings, I'll add in water equipment, and the same would apply for wastewater. That is generally operational equipment, but because of its cost, is allocated to water. So a quick example would be leak detection equipment if it needed to be replaced on the water side. Corporate projects, there are projects like the Burnside Depot, for instance, a lot of our asset management work and studies, condition assessment type things. IT projects are another big one, are classed as corporate projects. And then of course, according to our rate bases, they're split out to water, wastewater, and stormwater. But they are large collections of projects, as Louis indicated.
Is that the end of your questions, Commissioner Rawlings?
It is.
Thank you. Any further questions from commissioners? No, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. There's no motions required on this. Thank you, Reed, and everyone. Moving on to other business. Number 6, water quality master planning, moving toward a water safety plan. We have a presentation.
Thank you. And Wendy Krakosik, our water quality manager, is going to do this presentation. And this is a presentation that went to the Environment, Health and Safety Committee at the last meeting. And the Environment, Health and Safety Committee asked that it be provided to all of the Halifax Water Board. So here it is.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss Halifax Water's path forward for water quality planning. It presents a shift from our traditional model of water quality master planning towards a risk-based approach using a water safety plan. The objective of my presentation today is to provide you with a history of our water quality planning, provide reasons as to why we're changing our approach, and present the basic concepts of the new approach so that you can be informed for the future when you may start to see water safety plans come up in discussions. Next slide, please. Before I get started into the presentation, I want to go through a few definitions, as I'm going to be talking a lot about different types of plans, reports, and systems. So if we start with the Water Quality Master Plan, it's either a one-time or a periodic plan that examines water quality regulations and trends and makes future estimations of regulations, which allows the utility to set long-term goals and move towards developing cost-effective strategies to achieve those goals. This is the approach that Halifax Water has taken since 2006, and we complete plans every 5 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about our specific water quality master plans on the next slide. Water safety plans are a comprehensive and adaptive risk assessment and risk management approach to water quality planning from catchment to consumer, and they have the aim of consistently ensuring the safety and acceptability of a drinking water supply. This is an approach of continuous improvement and ensures that the highest risks to water quality are addressed first, while constantly assessing new risks and learning from incidents and emergencies. It was first developed by the World Health Organization and is included as a regulated program in many jurisdictions, including both Alberta and Ontario in Canada. The system assessment report is something that every 10 years we're required to complete by Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, and our next cycle is due on April 1st, 2023. The purpose of this report is to ensure that our systems meet current environmental standards and the minimum requirements of the Nova Scotia treatment standards for municipal drinking water systems. It is a source to tap assessment, and it has the same backbone as a water safety plan. However, it's more of a static report as opposed to a continuous improvement process. Enterprise risk management is something that I know you've heard a lot about. It's a system we adopted in 2020 to identify corporate risks, create a risk register, define risk appetite and tolerance, and assign risk responsibility. Risks that fall outside of the risk appetite are prioritized for mitigation. The goal is to identify, address, and assign ownership of the corporate risks and tie capital spending to risk reduction and mitigation. The core risk management framework for ERM is similar to that for a water safety plan. However, ERM deals with the water utility as a whole, not just water quality. So you could think of a water safety plan as a similar process, but focus more on water quality. Next slide, please. So Halifax Water has completed 3 versions of the Water Quality Master Plan since 2006. The first version was completed by consultants and focused on developing an optimization plan for the JDK water supply plant. Implementation of this plan resulted in the creation of the long-standing NSERC Halifax Water Industrial Research Chair Program with Dalhousie University and construction of the pilot plant at JDK. Version 2 was completed in 2011. It was written by internal Halifax Water staff, and again focused on specifics around optimizing the JDK treatment plant and also distribution system water quality. The second term of the research chair produced some pretty significant industry-leading research on understanding lead release and corrosion control, and that is what's shaped Halifax Water's progressive lead service line replacement program. Version 3 was written in 2016 by internal staff, and it was geared to be more, not so much plant specific, but with all systems in mind, and included aspects of source water treatment and distribution. The third term of the research chair that resulted from this water quality master plan provided a better understanding of the processes and implications of lake recovery on source water quality and its treatment implications. This has been a driving force for launching the Water Supply Enhancement Program, which will see both major plants upgraded to provide more robust treatment capable of meeting future water quality needs. So all 3 of these versions of the Water Quality Master Plan have led to significant research outcomes and resulted in operational improvements that have improved public health. However, there are limitations in this approach. The plan is often written with minimal stakeholder input, and once written, the Water Quality Master Plan is a document that often sits on a shelf, and it presents a missed opportunity for integrating water quality directly into asset management, capital planning, and operational decision-making on a more routine basis. Next slide, please. So we are living in a time of change. Times when supply chains are more fragile and public health is on the top of everyone's mind. Our regulatory environment is continually evolving and becoming more stringent. Balancing what are often conflicting regulatory requirements has become an increasing challenge. Most recently, we've seen changes to lead, manganese, aluminum, and algal toxin guidelines, which has led to significant operational changes. Updates to other guidelines like disinfection byproducts are likely coming in the near future as well. Halifax Water has also recently adopted the One Water approach. We're working on breaking down traditional silos and transferring knowledge and resources across our departments. More projects require a multidisciplinary approach for success. And as I mentioned previously, the launch of the ERM program allows us to move towards risk-based decision-making through identification, prioritization, and mitigating corporate risks. This process will affect how and where we spend money. And lastly, the research landscape is also changing. The existing NSERC Industrial Research Chair program has been changed to something called an NSERC Alliance grant. And Dalhousie University just submitted a 5-year proposal tackling water issues in a changing climate to this new program. The proposal this time combines both drinking water and wastewater into a One Water research program. The leveraged funding for this grant is even higher than before, so the impact of every dollar spent on research presents greater opportunity, so ensuring the research is targeted to the right questions will only enhance our utility outcomes. 2021 would mark the year for completing Water Quality Master Plan version 4. However, experience in writing version 3 as a new Halifax Water employee 5 years ago, and seeing all the change and challenges that we've encountered in the time since then, I saw this as an opportunity to take a step back and evaluate how we look at water quality as a utility to ensure that we're prioritizing and focusing on the right things to ensure robust and resilient treatment at the tap both now and in the future. Next slide, please. So I thought the vision was a great place to start, to come up with a better way to integrate water quality planning into our utility operations. And it was pretty clear right off the bat that water quality is a core value of the vision. So right at the top, we're going to provide our customers with high quality water. So it's paramount that water quality is a part of the conversation. Engagement in water quality research and participating in associations and research committees ensures that we're at the forefront of knowledge and can quickly adapt to best practices to ensure we're providing safe drinking water and protecting public health. Our forward-thinking lead program is a great example of this. Water quality is also a core piece of regulatory compliance. And lastly, water quality stretches across all departments from source to tap, in operations to engineering, planning, development, and compliance. It requires a truly interdisciplinary and collaborative approach to succeed. Next slide, please. So if we think about how water quality is currently incorporated into the different business groups at Halifax Water, this type of picture comes to mind. We have many different projects and programs that incorporate water quality. However, when you look how it all fits together, it is more like a bunch of islands with little interconnectivity. The historical Water Quality Master Plan process would touch on many of these areas, but there was no process to fully integrate them together. Next slide, please. So if we go back and thinking about the changing landscape and opportunities we have, it becomes clear that we're moving towards the utility being data-driven and risk-based decision-making and addressing our highest risk through risk reduction. So thinking about how water quality could become a part of this process, we have all of these different programs and processes, and a picture starts to emerge of how we can shift to have more effective use of resources and integrate water quality at the core of programs. So if we break down the silos at the top of this figure, we can ensure that engagement of the right stakeholders and there's a free flow of information. This will lead to better and broader development of a knowledge pool around water quality, which then allows for bigger picture planning, more integration, and effective use of resources. This will inherently move us towards increased risk reduction. And in doing this, we begin to move towards a more resilient and proactive model because the right stakeholders are engaged and planning and decision-making proceeds with access to the right information. So if we take all of those separated initiatives that included water quality shown on the previous slide and we fit them into this type of model, the picture begins to look a little bit more like what's presented on the next slide. So this is a much more appealing and integrated approach. This ensures that we're focusing on the right issues and with an effective use of resources, minimizing duplication of efforts and working towards our vision and one water approach. So the question is, how do we get here? So we have an opportunity now to change how we've historically completed the Water Quality Master Plan to ensure we can meet this new type of vision. Next slide, please. And the way we can do this is by moving away from a standalone Water Quality Master Plan towards a Water Safety Plan that uses a multidisciplinary approach. It creates a living program with a continuous improvement model that assesses and prioritizes risks to water quality. The Water Safety Plan was born out of a combination of the multi-barrier approach to drinking water quality combined with HACCP, which is the Hazardous Assessment of Critical Control Points. HACCP came out of the food industry and was a way to shift focus away from inspection of final products for safety and move towards identifying risks and hazards during production. So when translated to the water quality and the water industry, this means more of a know your system approach that's proactive as opposed to an end of pipe approach. So rather than reacting to incidents of non-compliance, the goal is to anticipate issues by identifying and mitigating risks ahead of time. To fully succeed, the water safety plan requires engagement at all levels, which inherently works to break down silos. Engagement leads to the development of a water system knowledge pool, which allows information to flow freely across departments. This in turn will lead to more proactive planning to ensure we continue to provide safe water and protect public health through efficient resource allocation. There are many benefits towards moving towards a water safety plan approach. So firstly, it allows integration with our new HRM process using the same methodology and risk assessment approach. The water safety plan risks can then feed directly into the ERM corporate risk register. So for example, identification of the need for enhanced treatment for taste and odor, algal toxins, and disinfection byproducts to improve customer confidence and meet future regulatory requirements is tied directly to a top ERM corporate risk of lake recovery. Furthermore, outcomes from the water safety plan can feed directly into asset management and capital planning and directly into the integrated resource plan. By knowing our system and identifying and addressing risks before they're a problem, it allows us to become more proactive instead of reactive, which reduces the possibility of regulatory compliance issues. The water safety plan is a living document and a process that is focused on the cycle of continuous improvement, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a few slides. The Water Safety Plan does not only focus on the regulations of today, but similar to the Water Quality Master Plan, we can also use reasonable predictions for future regulations to ensure that we have time to plan appropriately and cost effectively. This allows time to research to inform operations and capital needs. We can also combine the Water Safety Plan with other initiatives, including the System Assessment Report, which is a regulatory requirement. Rather than having two standalone projects, the Water Safety Plan can be based on the backbone of the System Assessment Report to ensure a cost-effective use of resources and to provide value both now and in the long term. Future System Assessment Reports will be greatly simplified once the Water Safety Plan process is established. And lastly, this is also an opportunity to include climate resiliency into water safety planning. But as with every new project, it also comes with challenges. And the first is that to truly succeed, the water safety plan requires buy-in at all levels and appropriate resourcing. Both operators and the executive are key to the knowledge pool in order to adequately identify and address water quality risks. While initially the water safety plan process will require resources to get established and off the ground, the goal in the long term is to become a more efficient use of resources by putting focus on the areas that most require it in an organized and timely manner. And by combining it with the System Assessment Report, we also minimize additional resource requirements in the future. There are also many different frameworks available for water safety plans, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. But we are lucky that with the establishment of our new ERM program and the requirements of the System Assessment Report, that this essentially points us in what direction we need to go to accomplish our goals. Lastly, there's a lot of change currently and a lot of new initiatives at Halifax Water, and right now, and the Water Safety Plan will be another one in that list. And change management is a challenge with any project and will take time. Next slide, please. So I've been talking a lot about ERM, water safety plans, water quality master plans, and system assessment reports. So this is a representation of how all of those fit together under our new approach. So the water safety plan takes the place of the water quality master plan, but it goes beyond and has a much wider scope. It also encompasses the requirements of the system assessment report. And with respect to ERM, you can think of the water safety plan as feeding into ERM. By using the same methodology between the two programs, water quality risks can be effectively managed and integrated into into ERM. Mitigation efforts can be directly translated from the water safety plan into the ERM. Next slide, please. So the next few slides will take us through a general water safety plan framework so that you can see the components involved. This particular framework was taken from the World Health Organization, who were the first ones to develop the water safety plan concept. And as with any risk management approach, the process is cyclical, which allows for continuous improvement and is based on the 4 principles of continuous improvement of plan, act, check, and do. Next slide, please. So the plan aspect of the water safety plan is the system assessment. This step is where you identify the hazards and assess the risks, develop control measures, and develop an improvement plan. The system assessment happens through a series of stakeholder workshops and where we begin to develop that knowledge pool. Operational monitoring and control measures are then developed to check and track the progress towards improvement. So these 2 sections are the core of the water safety plan, and they feed directly into the system assessment report, ERM, and they also identify research areas, which will feed directly into the Dalhousie Research Chair program on a continual basis. Next slide, please. The act and do portion of the water safety plan comes out of the system assessments through identification of upgrades required to mitigate current and future risks. This portion will feed directly into asset management, capital planning, and the integrated resource plan. Next slide, please. The second act and do portion of the water safety plan is to communicate and elevate risks as required to ensure effective resource planning to address risks. This provides the risk-based approach to feed into planning for internal resource needs, and it allows the development of management procedures and supporting programs. Next slide, please. Another great feature of a water safety plan is the built-in formal incident debrief process, which allows for identification of root cause of events, which may identify new risks that need to be incorporated in future versions of the water safety plan. This cycle all then continues with periodic review of the water safety plan and regular reporting and progress on risk mitigation. Next slide, please. So I've talked a little bit about frameworks and how the water safety plan is based on the principle of continuous improvement, but there are many different models that exist for water safety plans. And there are jurisdictions around the world that regulate different versions of water safety plans, including Alberta and Ontario in Canada, and countries like Iceland, New Zealand, and Australia all have regulated frameworks. The needs really from our perspective are that it needs to be something that's proven and flexible and scalable. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, and we need for it to complement and integrate into the ERM process. And we also want to incorporate the system assessment report into the water safety plan process. In Nova Scotia, we don't have a regulated framework for water safety plans. And so with the incorporation of ERM and the system assessment report, this gives us a roadmap for how we proceed with our framework. Next slide, please. So our next steps are to begin the process by establishing a water safety plan or a system assessment team. So this starts with developing a steering committee, which we have our first meeting in December. And from there, we work on selecting the framework that fits within the ERM and system assessment reports. And we start to develop our water system knowledge pool. From there, we conduct a series of hazard assessment workshops with key internal and external stakeholders. And the workshops will be on source water treatment and distribution. From there, once we have all the information, we can work on identifying and prioritizing the risks and developing control and assessment measures. Then this information then begins to feed into our asset management, capital planning, operations, and research programs. Next slide, please. So in summary, we're improving our historical water quality master planning process by moving towards a risk-based approach using a water safety plan. This approach will allow us to create a system knowledge pool and move us towards that one water goal. It'll allow us to deliver the 2023 system assessment reports by essentially killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This will also allow us to include water quality risks into asset management and capital planning. And this process provides continuous feed into research needs to inform the Dalhousie Research Partnership. It allows us to develop a formal process for monitoring progress towards risk mitigation, and it allows us to incorporate outcomes from incident debriefs into the plan to further mitigate risk. So hopefully this presentation has provided you with a bit of background as to our historical and planned approach to water quality planning, and will prepare you to start to see outcomes from the water safety plan as it feeds into ERM and make their way into future resource planning discussions. And that's.
Thank you very much, Wendy. It's terrific.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Commissioner Rawlings, I think you can start. We'll start off the
So
conversation.
I just wanted to give context to the board. As mentioned, the EHS subcommittee had recommended this for the full board, and it was based on our compliments to Wendy on her first presentation to the subcommittee. And what we really appreciated was how Wendy's presentation took us through basically the thought process of all the various pieces that Halifax Water is managing and putting it into a systematic process. And so I just wanted to repeat those compliments we had given Wendy and the context for why we thought it was important for the entire board to see that, especially as it ties to the ERM going forward. So great job again, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rawlings. Commissioner Lovelace.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I was really, really interested to see the direction that we're going in. I commend Halifax Water on the knowledge mobilization approach. Like, it's so important to be able to tie everything back to research and science, you know, and being able to leverage the incredible partners we have here locally that are doing research, who are connected to folks nationally and internationally that are doing research. So, you know, yay, way to go. This is so important. So I am going to raise an issue that has been percolating in the community, in HRM, as well as in media and misinformation on social media. And one of the things that you may have seen in the news today is around the Otter Lake landfill and the concern of the relationship between water quality and that landfill. You know, we're seeing a conversation coming up around the fact that, you know, there's going to be an increase in toxicity and pollution of the waterways, when in fact, you know, the building of those cells is, you know, the triple wall cells and so on is very strong. There's no leakage coming from those landfill site cells. But the question is the relationship between Halifax Water and the monitoring of any of that water that could be coming from Otter Lake and then ending up in the water treatment center, and through that process going into the harbor. So I know I'm stretching here, but I think that this is an important conversation for us as board members to be having, to make sure that when we are reading things on social media and reading things around water quality control and the heightened awareness of this conversation with the Department of Environment, HRM, the landfill, the land site operator, and things like that. So I just wanted to kind of raise that here so that we could have a better understanding of Halifax Water's you know, water safety plan as for you know, the extracting of water, wastewater, gray water, I guess you could call it, from Otter Lake landfill. Just wondering, Kathy or Wendy, if you can comment on that, please.
I can start. I can try. So our current involvement with Otter Lake is that we operate and maintain a very small drinking water treatment system for Otter Lake on site. So we do have water quality monitoring of that system, which includes groundwater monitoring. But I would say that our monitoring is fairly minimal in general at Otter Lake, and the Otter Lake area is not within our watershed boundaries for Pockwalk Lake. And so in terms of larger scale watershed monitoring, it's not part of our current plan.
I can add a little bit that NSCC is responsible for establishing the guidelines for landfills. I would say we have limited risk associated with either the Otter Lake or the old Sackville landfill. And we do have a service level agreement with the municipality whereby Halifax Water was doing some contract treatment of leachate coming from the old Sackville landfill. And because of our service level agreement and relationship with the municipality, if the municipality did need to engage our specialized expertise with respect to any water related issues arising from landfill related discussions, they would certainly reach out to us and be able to do so under that agreement.
Excellent. So I just have one follow-up to that then, because when we're looking at areas outside of our watersheds, right, those watersheds are clearly defined, areas that have legislative authority provincially, like they're protected, they're conserved. Now, any area that's outside of that is not necessarily protected, conserved, and monitored. We know that from HRM's approach to taking over some of the quality monitoring of our lakes and our water systems throughout HRM, because NSECC just hasn't had the ability to do that. So my question is, and I think Kathy, you and I have talked about this before, is when we're looking at this new approach, this larger kind of approach, do you see an opportunity, and this goes back to Ted's point earlier about the kind of unprecedented growth that we find ourselves in, are we at the stage, do you think, that we need to start looking at those other potential sites for watersheds and having those conversations with the province to see where that growth and capacity could be? I mean, we're building the town of Truro just in West Bedford right now, and as that town evolves and continues to grow, and that demand, goes that exurbia geographic land begins to grow outside further from that serviced area, that serviced area is going to have to expand. So like, we know that. I was driving through District 13 with this HRM CAO yesterday and going, look, that there's growth. Yep, there's growth coming there. There's growth coming there, and it's just exponentially exploding. So I'm wondering at what point we need to begin to do those kind of on-site recce's of new watersheds in HRM. Thank you.
Great question. So the newer board members would not have been here when we came with our last integrated resource plan. But Halifax Water does integrated resource planning, which is basically a 30-year time horizon look at what we need to do to service new growth, to maintain environmental compliance, and to also maintain our existing asset base. So part of the integrated resource plan is something called the infrastructure master plan. That's the piece that really looks at what we need to do to service new growth. And of course, looking at the adequacy of our supply is part of that exercise. And we do have sufficient supply for the current 30-year time horizon of the integrated resource plan based on the assumptions that were used the last time it was updated. But the IRP assumptions themselves, because we establish regional development charges, we're checking in with how those assumptions are doing based on reality on an annual basis. And minimally, we're required to update our integrated resource plan every 5 years. But if we saw something, that was concerning us with respect to what's happening in the actual development, our assumptions around new growth or our assumptions around consumption, there's nothing to prohibit us from acting earlier, and we could act earlier. Kenda, do you want to speak to the supply issue?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to build on some of Kathy's points about the integrated resource plan and our planning activities. We're about to embark on safe yield studies for the 3 major water supply systems that we have, and that'll give us information on how much yield we can draw from those respective watersheds safely and not impacting the environment. We also have just submitted a renewal for our withdrawal for Pockwalk, which is our largest water supply system. That expires next year, but we, being mindful of review times and consultation times with our regulator, submitted it with about a year lead time for them to review that. In addition to Pockwalk, we're also mindful we have Tomahawk Lake right beside Pockwalk, that we are managing that withdrawal permit with the regulator at the same time. And so basically the assumption would be that at some point, if we see that Pockwalk would not serve our needs, we would have Tomahawk available to draw from as well. So those are the types of exercises that are already in place and underway as we look at what our future water supply needs are going to be.
Okay, I really appreciate that. I do think with the changes that we're seeing with the provincial governments, stepping into development today, Jeff McClellan was just announced the new chair of the Housing Commission, and funds going directly towards developers. We are seeing, I think, an exponential change in our approach for development, and also, HRM's potentially lack of control over that development. So just thinking how we, if we do need to address the infrastructure master plan a little bit sooner, potentially have those, those reviews happen because of this exponential growth. But when was that? How long ago was that reviewed? Our IRP, I think you said every 5 years.
Yes, and the last one was done in 2019.
2019. Okay.
I should mention that the growth is also being partially offset, and in some years has been fully offset by increasing efficiency of new developments and houses and water using devices. We've been seeing steady decreases in consumption over the last 20 years. Last year and this year, we've kind of been flat consumption. Right now, our consumption year over year is up by, I think, about 0.5%, so about 0.5% maybe. So we're not seeing huge increases in consumption. So the increases in water efficiency are continuing, and we know that there's future additional opportunity for conservation and demand side management to play a big role in preserving capacity within our water systems.
That's good to hear. That's the same thing that we're seeing on the waste management side, is that, significant reduction. And so that those efficiencies and the changes in technology and so on are awesome. But I just have to point out we're the size of PEI. So, with climate change, the water table is unpredictable. It's never even been mapped. We know we have just here in Hammond Plains, boil water orders in place, not because of Halifax Water, but because of provincial issues with groundwater and the water systems, brand new water systems that are being set up for very large buildings. So, I'm concerned. I'm worried. I think we all should be, because water. I think you can't have a community without water. You can't have an industry or an economy without water. So thank you for all the work that you're doing to keep our water system safe. And I appreciate this opportunity. Look forward to hearing more. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovelace. Any further questions or comments? No, hearing none, seeing none. I want to thank as well everyone for his contribution to this. I think it only takes a quick glance at the news to see all the things happening in other areas, and including now in Nova Scotia and here in Cape Breton. It is not surprising people. It's on people's radar. And I think that as we go forward, the communication pieces around us sharing this story and these efforts and the way forward is going to be with the public is I think a really, really important piece on this. So just want to throw that out there so people are aware of what really good planning and plans are in place for addressing anything that might come along unexpectedly, as we can never predict. Okay, so where are we here? We are now we're approaching 5 to 12. I think, are we scheduled until 12? Just want to check in with folks. Can't remember. Check in with folks around timelines here. Does anyone have any hard stops that we need to be concerned with quorum or anything? Madam Commissioner Daigle-Gammon.
Yeah, sorry about that, Madam Chair. I have to leave now. I have a meeting downtown at 1 o'clock and a wee bit of a drive in, so I'll have to egg out early. Thank you all very much. Awesome meeting.
Thank you. I too have a meeting, the same meeting, I think at 1. And Commissioner Lovelace, did you have something to offer there?
No, I was just saying thank you to Commissioner Daigle-Gammon.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure that we're still okay for quorum, so hopefully we can get through these last couple of additional items. That'll be the plan.
I need to leave too. I also have a meeting downtown at 1. So
Okay, so let's see if we can't wrap these ones up without putting, too many constraints on your conversation. That I know Commissioner Farquhar would like to have these items brought forward.
Just
so
one.
go ahead, Commissioner. Just one. Okay. You have the floor.
Okay. Thank you very much. I wanted to bring forward item 1-1, which is the operational performance information report. I read through that and I had 2 questions for staff. You guys can all take a look at on Diligent page 126. So we're looking at the wastewater treatment facility for Halifax and the levels of E. coli and the toxicity. So on the surface, it looks alarming, but I know there's a good reason for that having to do with construction. But I really didn't know enough about the details, and I was curious if staff could tell me more about that, please.
I'm not sure if Sushil's going to take this or Kenda. So somebody should jump on. There we go.
Go ahead, Sushil.
Sushil, we can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself, which I'm going to see if I can do for you. No. And you are unmuted. So.
No, we can't hear you.
No, unfortunately not.
If Sushil wants to walk down to my office, he can try here, if that helps.
I think that's what he'll do. I'll turn your video off. Don't worry about it.
You could have turned on the video.
Yep.
All right, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so the plant is actually working at 50% capacity, if you will, because of some construction on one train that we're doing some construction. And that's why you see those high E. coli numbers. But once they get to the harbor, to the receiving water, we hardly see anything. We have that research. We have done that research in the past. Yes, it is a high number, and I guess to put it in perspective, in the raw sewage, you can see that number up to 5 to 10 million per 100 mils.
Okay. Do we have, first of all, how long will this go on? And then does the Nova Scotia Department of Environment have any concerns, or are they aware of this and have they accepted this?
Yes, they are. And we actually, when we do that, we advise them ahead of time. We let them know that this is what's happening, and it's how long of a duration of this project is. They're consulted.
Okay. How long will it go on for?
Sorry?
How long will it go on for?
For now, we have commissioned both trains, and but we will be again in construction in about 5 months or so. We know that we do have to do the second train on that.
Okay, so it's fine now, but it'll go back to having this higher level again when we do the second stage.
Yes, just to put it in perspective, we only have this disinfection requirements for the summertime. In the winter time, we don't even have a disinfection requirement, so there is high counts going out in the winter time because of the water use.
Okay, thank you. The next item I wanted to ask about was, it's on page 132 of Diligent. It's regarding the North Preston wastewater treatment facility. And out of all the facilities, I noticed this is the only one that has phosphorus, and it's exceeding. I was wondering if you could tell us about what the issue is, what phosphorus does, and how it affects the safety, or if there is any ongoing issue here that we need to be aware of.
So phosphorus is a nutrient which actually stimulates algal growth in the receiving waters. So that's the effect of that. And then when you have that algae die, that can be toxic or what have you. It is actually, you see that number there that's exceeding, that's a quarterly number. However, we are regulated on an yearly number. So our yearly average is just going to be fine. And that's what you see. Actually, our rolling average in the upper chart in the same report is green, that we are compliant in a 90-day rolling average. However, that particular quarter, we were slightly over. It's a very stringent limit of 1.3 milligrams per liter. So from an NSC perspective, the yearly samples are averaged to come to those numbers. And we're fine in terms of the overall yearly numbers.
Okay, sounds like there's no concern. Is this what would lead to, could potentially lead to blue-green algae?
Well, I mean, depends on what species are present in the watershed. It is a nutrient, and if that species is present, it would add to that.
Okay.
Now, in this particular case, this is not going into any water supply, if you will.
Okay, good to know. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I had.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else have any questions on this item? No? Thank you. I think that concludes our agenda. Our next, just want to iterate our schedule coming up. So we have a board tour, which will be really educational and piece for December 3rd. Looking forward to that. And December 9th, we have a board workshop. Lots of great, another really important educational piece and opportunity to talk about strategic priorities as we go forward. I don't think we'll have anything else between now and the new year, so I want to take this opportunity to, for staff and any of our viewing public and anyone that we might not see between now and then, I hope you have a great holiday season, and encourage you to take the time that we all need. Particularly, I find this environment now that we're all living in, we often get lost in not taking care of ourselves. I encourage you all to do that. Make good memories, and just take the time to remember that a lot of people in our communities are not as fortunate as us, potentially, and anything that we can all do to contribute to uplifting another person's life throughout the year is important, but in particular in a season that we're coming into where family gatherings and such may not be possible. So with that, I wish you all the best of the holiday season. I look forward to seeing many of you between now and when we formally break. But great meeting today, and thank you very much for all of your participation. Great work. Anyone else?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Commissioner Rawlings would motion for adjournment.
Thank you. Thank you. Motion to adjourn is received. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, everyone.